We were traveling with the cast and crew of the film to various cities on the release weekend. And after the show ended, the audience had no idea, but we'd come through from behind the screen and the lights would come on and suddenly Amir Khan and the cast are in front of this audience of people. And because it was the kind of film it was, which was a very emotionally wrenching film, especially in the climax, you had people break down, you had people, sort of vent their frustrations, you had the youth really coming out and talking about what's going on with the country today. You had ex-service people talking about their experiences because the film dealt with, an aspect of that.
Thank you so much for doing this with us, Siddharth. It's lovely to be back here again. And thank you for hosting all of us. I'm going to begin with a question that, it's not a typical question. You actually grew up in a home that's not necessarily in the film world. But as a child, you were acting on stage, you were doing all these things. Did you ever think that you'd be here in the future? Because one of the most common questions you're asked as a child is what you want to be when you grow up. Would you have ever said anything to do with films?
So when I grew out of my phase of wanting to be a deep sea diver, which was probably when I was 3 or 4 years old, I think the only thing that I ever wanted to be associated with was with the performing arts. So whether that was theatre or whether that was movies, that was always an aspiration. I always saw myself as doing something in relation to the performing arts.
Right.
Probably when I was growing up, it was wanting to be an actor because I enjoyed being on stage. I just loved the attention, I suppose. And I just felt alive then. And so, being sort of acting was something that I was quite obsessed with all through the time I was growing up.
Right.
And I was a complete film nerd. I'd watch every movie that released every Friday, whether it was a Hollywood film or a Hindi film. And I read every film magazine I could get my hands on. So it was something that I think I grew up with, ever since I can remember.
And what was your childhood like? What was it growing up with your brothers? What was, the career direction that, was it accepted, it's okay for you to take up anything to do with performing arts? Because back in the day, or even until now, it's not considered the most viable in the context of things. So what was it like?
Actually, in my case, it was quite the opposite. My grandfather and grandmother were proponents of ballroom dancing and Latin American dancing. So they were performers. They actually introduced a lot of, they sort of introduced the samba to India, for instance, and taught the samba for the first time. My mother was a performing artist since the time she was 6 years old. She was on stage and she was a dancer. She was a choreographer. So I grew up in an environment where the performing arts were just part of our lives.
Right.
There were rehearsals happening at home all the time for shows that my mum was doing. And so there was a lot of active encouragement to embrace the fact that I enjoyed the performing arts.
Correct.
So I have to say I was quite lucky in that respect, and so were my brothers.
And what kind of a student were you? Do you like studying? Do you enjoy the...
I didn't particularly enjoy studying, but I was a pretty good student.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
One of those.
Yeah, one of those. Yeah. I was not into sports at all.
Okay.
So it was more elocutions and drama and stuff like that.
Right.
But academics was something that just came naturally to me.
Oh. And is there any particular incident that you remember from your childhood that stands out? This made me smile, or this made me feel a certain way. Is there anything that you can recollect?
In relation to?
Anything. Just a memory that stands out.
A lot of movies that made me cry,
oh,
actually.
Really?
And I would leave the theatre bawling. So that, I think, is a memory my grandfather and my mum will have quite a strong recollection of, where they weren't allowed to watch many movies to the end because I would end up bawling somewhere midway through. Most often because the actor I loved was in trouble on screen.
So very emotionally connected to the character.
Very.
Right.
So, and especially if it was Amitabh Bachchan in anything. And the problem is he was doing so many movies where he was impending death was quite clear was going to happen. I would be out of that theatre before the climax. Exactly.
How fun.
Yeah.
And then as you grew up and you made your choice of which direction you'll go in, you didn't choose anything related to films. How did that happen? How did that...
The time that I was growing up, so I went to Sydenham College where we had a vibrant dramatic society, which I was a part of. And, I helped to curate productions in the course of the year and put projects together and get sponsors and all that. But it was always an extracurricular activity rather than something one was doing full time.
Yeah.
And like I mentioned, I think for those of us who are academically inclined as well as enjoy the performing arts, it becomes a tough call, because very often you don't enjoy academics at all.
Correct.
And then you don't have a choice but
yeah.
you want to be, I mean, you enjoy performing arts and that's what you do.
Yeah.
I did have that choice. And I guess I opted for the safer option at that point of time because there weren't that many structured avenues then. Even if I followed, the route of wanting to do TV then, the sort of stuff that was happening on TV was not quite my sensibility.
Exactly.
When I was, sort of coming out of college then. And so movies was the only route to go.
Right.
And I don't think I ever really considered putting myself through that entire stress of struggling through, going to producers' offices with my portfolio, etc. It just wasn't something that sat well with me. And so because I was able to get into a pretty good MBA school and, I sort of decided that I'll bide my time and go down this route for now and then figure out a way somehow or the other to get into the media.
So you knew your destination, you were just you were figuring out the journey?
At that age, I have to say that it's like I wanted that to be my destination, but you can't ever know that you'll get there, right? You have the hope of it and you have the ambition for it, but there doesn't seem any real path to it.
But did you believe it somewhere deep down that...
I think I did. I think somewhere deep down I knew that I would not be able to sustain myself if I continued down the route of...
corporate India.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And when you got your first job and it was at a renowned company, how did that experience kind of either strengthen this belief that, okay, like I definitely belong in the media world and I don't know what I'm kind of doing here? Or did it just accentuate the qualities needed to get there? Like, was it a stepping stone?
It was both in a way. So I joined the Procter & Gamble company straight out of business school. And it's a wonderful organization, incredibly smart people. It is called sort of the breeding ground for future marketeers who go on to lead companies both in India as well as in the West. So I couldn't have asked for a better marketing organization to start my career with. And I found myself quite miserable, I have to say. I think it was because I just wasn't cut out to be in brand management, managing brands that I don't feel an emotional connection to.
Right.
There's some people who are just born marketers.
Correct.
And you give them anything and they will market the hell out of it because they enjoy the process of marketing.
Yeah. It doesn't matter what you're marketing.
It doesn't matter what you're marketing. It's just marketing just gives them that kick, right? So it could be a detergent, it could be a cola. It really doesn't matter to them. For me, I realized in those 2 years at P&G that it was important for me to form an emotional connection to the product itself. And in FMCGs, you can drink the Kool-Aid and say that you're doing it, but you're not really, it is a bit of a stretch.
Right.
And so I realized that if I wasn't being able to hack it at a company like P&G and get my jollies out of marketing at a place like that, it's not going to happen anywhere.
So how long did you stick around?
I stuck around for 2 years.
Okay.
Again, wonderful people, great organization. I was just the wrong guy for the place.
And finally, when did you decide, okay, I'm going to go on to my next thing and then find the product that I would love to market?
I was talking to placement consultants at that point of time, and all of whom were just shocked that someone from Procter & Gamble wants to move this early in their career. Like, what did you do? Did you set fire to a warehouse or something? What did you do wrong?
People last decades. Like, their first job is like sometimes
Exactly. And
their
a lot
last
of people in places like Levers and P&G just stick around their whole careers there because they're great places to work. And so a placement consultant, Rekha Koshi, actually mentioned to me that there was an opportunity at Star. And at that point of time, Star was in an interesting phase where, they'd been a half Hindi and half English channel for a long time because they had an agreement with Zee where they had to be both.
Yeah.
But they were getting out of that agreement and now they were going to go all Hindi.
Correct.
So she mentioned there's an opportunity in strategic planning, which of course I found very, exciting because it was strategic planning.
Yeah.
Not realizing it was a glorified EA, pretty much. But I just put my hand up for the job and sort of took it immediately.
Yeah.
And I have to say it gave me the chance to be in the cusp of all the action that was happening in the heart of the disruption in television at that point of time.
At the right time, basically.
Yeah. So you had Peter Mukherjee, who just came into his role leading the company. I was working with Shumantru Datta, who was heading up ad sales. Raj Naik was heading up another part of ad sales, and there was Sameer and I looking after programming. So there were all these really big heavy hitters now in a position to, unshackled by the fact that they didn't have to do this quasi-English, quasi-Hindi channel, go all Hindi, had the resources to do it, had the Murdoch's backing to do it. And I just found myself being a fly on the wall in all those meetings where these big decisions were being taken. So it was very exciting.
And a great experience, of course, at that time. I have a question here. You know, most times people are caught in a dichotomy between chasing your dream or like finding your purpose or what is it that drives you, and just the safety net of financial stability. At this point, when you were transitioning from such a like a PNG, did that ever cross your mind that, you know, like if I just stay here and grow here, I'm going to be really comfortable? Or was it always like, no, like I got to find that thing and then make a life and career?
No, there's always going to be that, should I or shouldn't I question. I can't say it was such a pristine answer in my mind as that is my purpose and I shall follow it.
Yeah.
Of course it was, but you definitely end up thinking about financial security, especially at that time in your life.
Right.
But I was lucky that it was happening that early in my career that I took this decision to move.
Yeah.
I suspect the barriers to exiting a company as great as PNG a few years down the line would have been very high.
Yeah. Like
because you're giving up a lot more.
Yeah.
Thankfully, because it was happening earlier on in my career, there was less to lose.
Right. And did you ever consult with family, friends, or have you been the kind of person who's sure and takes his independent decision?
I'm sure I discussed it with friends and family, but I do end up taking decisions like that
unilaterally,
finally on my own.
Yeah.
Of course, it's always good to get input, but this is something that was coming from within.
Right.
And it wasn't anything that logically anyone will tell you to do, because it just seems like an illogical thing to be doing.
Yeah.
Especially at that point of time where media was really quite nascent in people's minds as a stable career option.
Right. You mentioned you were like a fly on a wall in these important meetings at such a crucial time in media in India. Is there anything that you learned that you could share with our audience that struck you back in time and helped you shape your journey? Anything that you learned? One or two things?
I think probably taking big bets and backing yourself with them all the way. Right. I think the fact that Star Plus just went all in on Kaun Banega Crorepati.
Yeah.
Went ahead and decided to go and get the biggest star India's ever seen to come onto television for the first time. Yeah. To spend the amount that, we spent at that point of time on the show. To then follow that up with backing someone like Ekta and her K shows as being the shows that follow that up in prime time. And just going all in.
Yeah.
So that's one lesson I learned pretty early in my career, where if you're taking a bet on something and it's a big bet, then don't do it in half measures.
Correct.
Just go all the way.
Yeah.
And it might pay off or it might not, but at least you've gone with the entire courage of your conviction.
Right. So how did it feel when you used to cry if he died on screen, and then now you're working with him? How did it feel to meet Mr. Bachchan for the first time?
I can't say I worked with him, because I was genuinely such a junior member of the marketing team at that point of time that I was literally sure. I was around on set and there were photo sessions happening with him for all the marketing creatives that we needed, etc., etc. But it was surreal.
Yeah. Just seeing him in like flesh and blood.
Yeah, it was surreal.
Yeah.
I had one earlier encounter with him, not with him, but tangentially, where my uncle was playing a dancer in a film called Naseeb when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I'd landed up with him on the set of the film, and I wanted to meet Mr. Bachchan, and Mr. Bachchan was taking a nap. And I think Rishi Kapoor saw me at that point of time. I was a fat little lump. And they hadn't shot for the younger sequences of Rishi Kapoor, Amitabh Bachchan, etc. I think Rishi Kapoor saw me and said, hey, he can play the young me. And I cried and said, no, I will play the young Amitabh Bachchan. So I refused to meet Mr. Rishi Kapoor. Yeah. I think I told him the story many years later. He was very upset.
So why didn't you play me?
Exactly. But that was my tangential encounter with Mr. Bachchan taking a siesta.
Yeah, you saw him.
I saw him.
Yeah.
But no, it was surreal. It was wonderful to be associated with something that he was a part of.
Right.
But even more so, I think just the fact that this is something where he was taking such a big punt on at that point in his life.
Yeah.
And the fact that, someone like Sameer and Peter had managed to convince him to take this step along with them and do this show.
Yeah.
And then just being around on the day of the launch where the whole team had gotten together and there was complete silence across I mean, we were in Bombay, but we heard it was across the country at 9 p.m. It was like you go on the roads and the roads were empty.
Wow.
Everyone was watching Kaun Banega Crorepati. So that was
special,
very special.
And how did life change after that?
It was interesting after that because I was part of something called the News Corp Executive Development Program, and I was identified as a young leader to take forward on that basis. So I was sent to Hong Kong, where I stayed for a while. I then moved to Dubai, where I was heading up sales and marketing for Star for a year and a half, and then moved back to Hong Kong with Star, where I was looking after what we call the Central Marketing Agency, which was like an internal advertising agency for Star that serviced China, Southeast Asia, Taiwan, the Middle East, etc. And I was running that for a while. So.
And when you took the next step and became the CMO at UTV, did you feel like, okay, finally come to a place where I can market something I truly love, as opposed to the beginning of your career?
So I'd felt that a little bit earlier at Star as well, because I was associated with things that I had my emotions invested in. But I suppose movies was that holy grail that I'd always been looking at being associated with. And when Ronnie, I'd stayed in touch with Ronnie because I'd done a summer internship at UTV back in the day when I was still in college. And I'd stayed in touch with him and seen his phenomenal growth over that time. And I'd been out of the country for 5 years by then, between Hong Kong and Dubai and then back to Hong Kong. And when Ronnie called and said, I've set up a movie studio, greenlit a couple of films, one film called Basanti, which is this big film that we're releasing next year. Do you want to come in and head up the marketing for the studio as well as the kids channels and UTV corporate overall? And I was literally on the next flight back to Bombay.
Yes.
Yeah. And it was great. It was really an exciting time because it felt like you're associated with something quite pioneering.
Yeah.
And I think what Ronnie was doing at that time was really breaking a lot of glass ceilings that existed in the industry, where a lot of things happened because you were born into it.
Right.
And I think he was one of the first outsiders in the production sector to come in and say, I'm going to change the model and I'm going to do something differently. And it was great to be there with him from day one.
So what was your thought process on your first day as CMO of UTV and marketing these very iconic films which have obviously gone down in legend? How did it feel? It's
so strange, but today happens to be exactly 18 years from the time that I joined UTV.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's quite a
special day.
I was actually thinking about that this morning. Yeah. It's quite strange. So it was 18 years ago. And if I had to talk about my first day, I think it was pure chaos. I think you realize that you have entered, though I was in News Corp for 6 years before that, so I have to say it's not like I was unused to the media. I'd already made the move from P&G to News. But coming back to India, number one, after being out for 5 years, two is being thrown into a work environment where everything's happening on the fly.
Yeah.
And that's exciting, but it's also chaotic, right?
It's so dynamic.
It's dynamic and things are changing and there's a crisis a minute. And I was thrown right into the thick of it as Ronnie tends to do with people who join him.
Yeah.
And which is great also in a way. It's terrifying, but also wonderful. And so it was just hitting the ground running from day one.
Wow.
There wasn't a moment to breathe and just figuring it out as I went along.
What was your strategy for Rang De Basanti in terms of marketing? That, okay, I'm going to be disruptive about this process in terms of how films are typically marketed.
So Rang De was actually quite a case study at that point of time. Yeah. People hadn't really done city visits and road shows and associated with brands and done fashion shows with clothing themed around the movie. We did a lot of that with Rang De Basanti, and probably because it was the first big movie that I was marketing, it just felt very, very dear and special. And, our team was a new team and we were all just bubbling with ideas and bubbling with ways in which to market movies that had not been done before. And I guess we were helped by the fact that marketing before that had been pretty vanilla when it comes to movies. You had a few hoardings up, you had a few print ads, you did a couple of press conferences, you put out your trailer, put out your music, and that was marketing, right? But just traveling with the cast and crew across cities and doing a tie-up with NDTV where we went into colleges and spoke about what the youth are feeling today. We tied up with Provogue, I think, at that time and did a fashion line.
Wow.
We tied up with Coke and there were Coke-branded Rang De Basanti bottles that were released at that time. There was a whole lot of things that we did for Rang De that were actually quite path-breaking, but seem like everyone's doing them today. So that was a really, really exciting film to be responsible for the marketing of.
And when it blew up, the way it did blow up, what was that feeling like? Like, did you feel like I've
That
arrived?
was, again, really, it was, you have these moments where you realize why you're doing what you're doing and why you're involved in what you're doing. I mean, I had it first on KBC and then on Runway, where you're part of something that's become the zeitgeist of the nation suddenly. And that feeling is incomparable.
Correct.
So we were traveling with the cast and crew of the film to various cities on the release weekend. And after the show ended, the audience had no idea, but we'd come through from behind the screen and the lights would come on and suddenly Amir Khan and the cast are in front of this audience of people. And because it was the kind of film it was, which was a very emotionally wrenching film, especially in the climax. You had people break down, you had people, sort of vent their frustrations, you had the youth really coming out and talking about what's going on with the country today. You had ex-service people talking about their experiences because the film dealt with, an aspect of that. And it was a cathartic experience, every screening that we went to. So it wasn't just we're coming there and waving to the audience and they're clapping and leaving. And that was unbelievable. So for someone as impressionable as I was in the industry at that time, where I was just starting out, it was really a moment which told me that this is the kick that you keep working towards, right? To be associated with something that can move people in that way and that can be that can capture the zeitgeist of the country, even if for that brief moment.
And it was a feeling that you wanted to keep chasing after?
It's a drug. It really is, because it just makes you, it just energizes you for the next one and it makes you yearn for the next time you're going to be feeling it.
Right.
And you just chase after it.
What was life like after Rang De Basanti? In terms of your trajectory from being CMO to CEO, it's also not just a change of title, but roles, right? You're not just looking after marketing, it's a macro process. You're looking at P&Ls and things like that. Did you enjoy that aspect as well?
I did. I relished every moment of it because movies is what I love and enjoy. It's like a lifeblood that sort of gives you the sustenance and the enthusiasm to carry on. It's something that just fills you with adrenaline. So for me, it was great to be involved in every aspect of it, from revenue to marketing to production to distribution to syndication. Everything was something that I just dived into, and I had an incredible team. There was a really, really dynamic young team of people who grew with the company, and we were all like made to feel like we were entrepreneurs in the best sense of the word. I think that's the best thing that Ronnie was able to do, is that he made you all feel like you owned the company, which is so hard to do when you're an employee and he's the entrepreneur and you are employees at the end of it. But he gave us that sense of ownership, and that was incredible.
And did you have the vision of doing different projects and kind of pushing the envelope of films in India? Because that's something that you can see with the kind of films that were produced under your CEOship in UTV. Was that a conscious decision, or did it just happen on the fly?
It was a conscious decision, but I have to say some things can be planned and some things can't. So the conscious decision was to work with directors who have something to say and not follow the star approach, rather follow the director approach. Because, the relationships with stars were there, but they would never be as entrenched as those who've been born into the business. But there are so many directors out there with a point to prove, with something to say that maybe is not being backed and that is not being given the opportunity to see the light of day. And so our strategy was to follow a director-based approach, number one. Number two, to be genre agnostic. To just say, we're just looking for content that breaks through the clutter. And it came at an interesting time because the multiplex boom was underway as well. Audiences were coming back to the cinema and wanted something different, cinematically too. So it was the perfect storm, in the best sense of the word. And the path that we could not have planned for was the kind of material that would come to us, because those are things that really depend on you attracting the right kind of material. But you never know if such diverse genres will come, such interesting directors will come your way. But I guess the conscious part sort of influences the part that you're not responsible for, because once you put that out there and people know that this is what you're interested in and these are the kind of movies that you're happy to back, then you sort of attract people who've got different stories to tell, which are not getting the backing that they need.
So up until now, the journey seems very vanilla, right? Like it's like straightforward in terms of a timeline. I'm sure there are dips, whether if, under UTV at a certain point, there were flops, there were films that didn't perform, or just through your career and even your college life. I'm sure that there were times which were not as stable as it comes out to be now. Do you remember any such times where, it was a dip in the journey, and how did you overcome, or what was your mindset that propelled you forward as opposed to backward? Because you obviously went forward.
Yeah. No, I remember many such times actually. My time at PNG was one of those times where I felt inadequate in a way because all my peers were enjoying what they were doing so much.
Right.
And I tried to get myself to, but I was not being able to. And I didn't really have an out at that point of time because it just felt bizarre to be in this wonderful organization with these great, intelligent, smart people all around you, given an opportunity like that, which so many people hanker after, and not be enjoying it.
Right.
And it felt like a very first world problem to have, and it might have seemed entitled to many people for me to even share that as an issue, but it was. And so it was a time of great struggle internally.
Correct.
I guess the other time would be when I was out of the country, though, within News Corp, it was, again, great company to work for. But I constantly felt like I was in exile in a way. When I was in Dubai, when I was in Hong Kong, I'd be opening up timesofIndia.com and checking out what's happening
going
here.
on in my country, yeah.
I'd want to know the latest stuff that's being produced, that's being made, and feel like I'm away from the action. Yeah. So in a sense, I was in a media company, but not in the place where the media is being produced.
Yeah.
I was in places like Hong Kong and Dubai which were...
You were on the periphery.
On the periphery of it. In an ironic way, Hong Kong was actually the headquarters of Star.
Right.
So it was great to be at the headquarters and where that action is happening, but not where the actual work is happening and is being created.
Right.
And so it was a sense of enjoying the city, enjoying the company, great position to be in, but not enjoying the work as much.
Correct.
And it was only when I came to UTV that it all came together, I think.
Yeah.
So, that's the time that I actually felt like it's all coming together. So lots of times before that, where despite the outward appearance of success and being in great places, there was a lot of inward sort of demons one was fighting with.
And how do you overcome those? Like, how would you typically, as a personality, overcome the dips when they come along the way?
It's patience and resilience, really.
Okay.
I think I have both those qualities, which have helped me quite a bit. I can wait it out. Okay. And I somehow have the faith that things will turn.
Yeah.
However bad it might be in a certain moment, I always believe like there are good things on the horizon and good things are going to happen.
So the positive mindset.
Yeah, it's just the knowledge and the self-belief probably that things will change if you just keep at it.
Correct.
There's this interesting quote which talks about luck and hard work, and it's like the harder you work, the luckier you get. And I really believe that because I don't believe in luck on its own.
Correct.
I believe in putting yourself in the right place at the right time, but the right place and right time is not going to come and present itself to you. You've got to be at it and put yourself out there in a way where you are in that moment when an opportunity presents itself.
Yeah. Are you a workaholic? Because now or back in the day, did you ever think that, okay, no, I love this too much. I don't necessarily need the work-life balance, for example. Like sometimes if I'm editing a piece at like 3 a.m, and I'm like, but I'm really happy doing it. So why should I force myself to have that kind of balance? Is that something that you've also dealt with?
Absolutely. I think as soon as you have, say, work-life balance, you've almost made it seem like work is not the fun part and life is what I need to keep time aside for. And now that's a strange place to be. It's sad if you're in that position, but I don't see it as that at all. I think there are ways in which to integrate your work and your life in a way where you can be living both at the same time and not have them be fractured, right? Because if you enjoy what you do and you love what you do and you enjoy experiencing life at the same time, you can do both simultaneously and one can merge into the other. So some people might call me a workaholic.
Right.
But I don't see it as that. I just see it as doing something I enjoy.
Yeah. So it's not like, oh, I'm not having fun here, I'm having fun there. It's just a little bit of both.
It is. It is. And sure, you got to set time aside for things that you want to experience and you want to enjoy. But that doesn't mean that you need to shut out the other part of whatever it is that you're doing.
Right. how was the move finally when you decided, I'm going to start my own production company? Was that a difficult decision to make? Because you seem very emotionally attached to UTV and your time there and the team there especially. How was it when you decided, and what propelled you to make this decision?
It happened pretty seamlessly, I have to say. It felt like a natural culmination of events. So when I was running the Walt Disney Company in India from 14 to 16, Dangal was the last film at the end of 16. That's when my 3-year contract, in a sense, came to an end as well. Yeah. And when I was approached to renew it, it just felt like I'll be leaving on a high with Dangal being the last film. I had hope.
I mean, high is into 10.
Yeah. I mean, that's the hope, right?
Yeah.
The film had not released. So the hope was I'll be leaving on a high. And it just felt like I've done what I've had to do, like sort of heading the company in India. And the next step would have been to probably go to another geography, head that, probably move to Burbank at some point of time, because that's the natural evolution of a corporate career, right? Okay. Even if you're with a media company. But that's sort of the opposite of what I wanted from my life. I wanted to be making movies and series and content and live entertainment and be involved in all these things here in India. Yeah. And so it just felt like this feels like the right time to do it. Right. Also, I was aware that the later I kept it for, the harder it would be to do. Because like we were discussing, the barriers.
PNG,
exactly. Yeah. The barriers to doing it keep increasing.
Correct.
And so it just felt right.
Were there jitters?
Sure. Yeah. There were. But again, I think my training in feeling a sense of ownership, even when I was an employee, helped me in that regard. It didn't feel very much different. It's not like suddenly I felt, oh, now this is my money and I'm now responsible. I had that feeling even earlier, strangely enough, though it wasn't technically my money and I was an employee. Yeah. But that feeling wasn't different. What it did give me a sense of was that, this is I'm now responsible for the employees that I hire completely myself, right? There's no larger corporate entity that they're joining. They're joining the place because I am running it.
You're the brand that's pulling these people.
Exactly.
Right.
And so that sense of responsibility, the sense of responsibility to the creative people that one is working with, and just the sense that, okay, this is a new journey that I haven't really tried before.
Right.
And I haven't done this part of it before. But it was exciting.
And what was it like when you got into it, right? Like it came into flesh and blood. There's an office, there's people. Did you have a first line of order saying, okay, these are the kind of things we want to do over here and this is how we want to do it differently?
I did. It was more of just saying that, again, we're genre agnostic. We don't want to look at only one particular kind of film. Or series. We want to be open to all kinds of ideas. We want to work with all kinds of talent, not only established talent, but also young talent. And we want to do things that we really believe in and stories that really need to be told.
Right.
Which sounds very esoteric and sounds quite broad, but actually does help you as a guiding force,
like a light,
in a sense, because you then have the call to not be doing things that you are probably doing in a studio model because you need to be doing things at scale.
Right.
And therefore, there are some calls that you take which are much more quarter-driven.
Correct.
And sort of bottom-line driven than calls that you can take as an independent entity. So you have the luxury of doing that to some extent.
And did you ever feel a sense of not victory, but did it feel good to know that you are an outsider who now has started his own production company and doing all of these great films for Bollywood? Do you feel a sense of, okay, I really want to push the envelope just because, I'm not bound by certain restrictions or certain decisions that come from the top?
The part about the outsider, I've never really felt that. I mean, from the time that I came into the industry and started interacting with people, I felt like an insider. Right? And I felt like if you deal with people in a certain way and you give them respect and you show the value you can add to their lives and to their careers, they'll embrace you. Yeah. And it's as simple as that.
Right.
So there wasn't any point to prove on that front.
Exactly.
But it was much more about just feeling good that one had got to a place where one could actually set out on one's own and set something up and be producing at scale.
Yeah. And now that it's your production house, did the projects that didn't do as well, did it hit harder, or did you feel like was it okay, now this is way more personal because you're involved to that level?
The pain is the same.
Okay. The pain remains the same.
The pain remains the same. So, you felt it as keenly and as sharply even when I was back at UTV
right.
or at Disney.
Yeah.
You feel that
pinch.
The pinch of failure as sharply. I don't think that changed at all. Which is good. Which means
good,
that which
that
means
you were also giving 100%.
That's consistent.
Right.
That's consistent. the feeling is not good.
Is
the fact that the pain is not anymore makes me feel good.
Yeah, it's the same.
Yeah.
What's next in terms of pushing the envelope or creating more disruptive projects within the industry?
One is that disruption for the sake of disruption is definitely not what I'm looking for. So I'd love to make commercially successful, viable content that might tell stories in different ways.
Right.
But the key is that it should be commercially successful, because if it's commercially successful, that means that more people are watching it. That means it's touched a chord with audiences, which is who it's intended for. But if it's able to disrupt the narrative and be commercially successful, that's wonderful.
Right.
Which therefore means that you're being able to tell stories differently. You're being able to bring new talent to the fore.
Yeah.
And for me, one of the big ambitions is really to be able to take Indian stories to the world.
Yeah.
So if that's possible over the next 5 years with series and with movies that we do, that would be a wonderful next step to take.
Yeah. And who are you outside the production company? Who are you at home? What do you like doing? Are there any hobbies that you take particular interest in? Do you now have work-life balance, or is it the same?
I never felt I didn't have work-life balance, because like I was saying, I think work and life are pretty interwoven.
Yeah.
And thankfully, both my wife and my family are all from the industry and in the industry in a way. So we all understand each other and, are all sort of working through the same work-life situations that occur. So that's wonderful to have that circle around you, which is your closest circle, that understands how you are, because they're going through exactly the same thing themselves. But how I am is like I watch a lot of movies, which is
that's
no surprise.
Yeah.
I the usual. I think like any average Joe, I enjoy going to restaurants and checking out new places and watching movies and being a couch potato. And just like, sitting there and binging shows,
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, great. We're going to go to our next segment. It's called The Things About You That We Couldn't Find on Google. And there were very less things. Really had to dig deep.
I'm glad.
To figure out what's going on. Okay, between you and your brothers, who was the naughtiest while growing up?
Probably Aditya.
Your favorite holiday destination?
New York.
Your favorite Vidya Balan film?
It's a tie between Parinita, Pa and Kahani. Hard for me to take a call between those three.
They're great films.
Yeah.
What did you do with your first ever salary?
And No One Killed Jessica, because that's a film that we did together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's just add that also. What did you do with your first ever salary?
I probably blew it up on some meal with my school friends or something like that. I'm quite sure.
Okay. What does a Sunday at the Kapoor household look like?
Lots of food.
Okay.
And talk about food. And talk about movies and about life in general.
Yeah.
Politics.
Wow.
Just a very loud time with us stuffing our faces quite a bit.
That's ideal. Your favorite place in Bombay?
Probably Colaba, because that's where I grew up.
Okay.
So I have a lot of memories in every nook and cranny of Colaba.
Yeah. A comfort movie that you can't do without. So your go-to comfort movie?
Sholay and When Harry Met Sally.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Who would you lean on for professional advice from the industry?
Ronnie.
Your go-to person?
I think my family, my wife, my parents, my brothers, that core family unit.
One dish you can't do without?
My dad's mutton curry.
Oh, yeah. What would be the title of a movie based on your life, if there were one?
Work-life imbalance.
That's a good title. Okay, now we're going to show you some photos. You have to tell us what was going on behind the scenes.
Okay. That was in Delhi probably.
Sky is pink.
The Sky is Pink. We were shooting in Delhi and there was the rooftop sequence between Priyanka and Farhan. So we're all smiling very sweetly at the camera, but I'm sure there's some production madness going on in the background.
You can't see.
Yeah. That's Karan, Raju and me. I'm sure Raju's being naughty about something and I'm grinning away because it's very un-Raju-like to be naughty about something.
Okay, amazing. It gets us to our last question. What advice would you give the youth, say who are just starting out, if they want advice on finding their purpose, finding their passion, or general advice, given that you've had so many experiences, what would it be?
You know, I hate giving advice because it somehow seems like we know it all when actually we're all still figuring it out. But if there's one thing that I would tell the younger generation is just keep at it. If there's something that you love and enjoy, don't give up too easily. Because doors open. If you just keep knocking at them, they open at some point of time. So don't give up.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the time. It's been a lovely episode and on an iconic day, 18 years like we established.
Yeah.
So it's a good day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
If you like this episode, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that bell icon. Thank you all for being the best community and I'll see you soon.